The Forest of Crystals wasn't exactly the kind of vacation spot Captain Jax Arlen had in mind when he signed up for this gig. It was like someone had taken a glitter bomb to a petrified forest and left it to the elements. Except the elements were more hostile than a tax auditor during peak season. The air was so thick with particles you'd swear you were breathing through a straw full of grit and regret. "Well, isn't this quaint?" Jax muttered, kicking a particularly obnoxious shard of blue crystal out of his path. It responded with a brittle crack and a shower of tiny fragments, as if the universe had decided that everything here needed to be just that more annoying. Beside him, his second-in-command, Taylor Vex, was wrestling with a scanner that looked like it belonged in a museum. "These things are about as reliable as a politician's promise," she grumbled, smacking it against a thigh that seemed to be more cybernetic than organic these days. "I swear, Jax, if this thing gives me one more reading of unknown energy source, I'm gonna retire and start a farm." Jax snorted. "Yeah, because you've got such a green thumb. I remember that fern you had on the bridge. Lasted a whole week before you incinerated it by accident." "Wasn't an accident," Taylor shot back with a grin. "It was a mercy killing. Speaking of mercy, how's our historian squad doing?" Jax turned to glance at the rest of the team, who were plodding through the crystal field like reluctant tourists. The historians, led by one doctor, Ethan Cross, were the kind who believed every artifact they touched had to be treated like a delicate vase made of spun sugar. "Cross is about as happy as a clam in a salt flat," Taylor replied, pointing at the good doctor who was crouched over some alien inscription, peering at it through a magnifier that seemed hilariously oversized for the task. Ethan was muttering to himself, a habit that drove Jax up the wall but was probably the only thing keeping the historian sane in the field. "You know, for a guy who spends his life looking at old rocks, he's got a real thing for dramatics," Jax commented. "Comes with the territory," Taylor shrugged. "You stare at the past long enough, you start thinking you're part of it. Or worse, that it's whispering back at you." Jax shook his head and returned his attention to the task at hand. The Zinth Syndicate had set up shop on Verzura, and whatever they were planning here, it involved erasing Earth's history. One might think that humans could do that all on their own, but apparently they needed help from intergalactic thugs too. "Captain, you might want to see this," yelled Dr. Cross suddenly, his voice echoing sharply among the crystal pillars. Jax and Taylor exchanged a glance before making their way over to him. "What have you found, Doc?" Jax asked, crouching next to where Ethan was pointing at a slab of crystal etched with symbols that looked like the unholy child of hieroglyphs and an Escher painting. "It's a record," Ethan said, eyes shining with that dangerous mix of academic zeal and caffeine. "An ancient one. But look at the language, it's based on human alphabets." Somehow these aliens were chronicling human history. Taylor gave a low whistle. "So, aliens really have been watching us all along. I owe some conspiracy theorists an apology." Jax leaned closer, squinting at the jumble of symbols. "Okay, so they took notes. What's the big deal?" "The big deal, Captain," Ethan said, finger tapping a particularly prominent symbol that looked disturbingly like a stylized skull, "is what they're planning to do with this knowledge. This," he gestured at the artifact, "is linked to something that could wipe out every trace of human history. The Syndicate wants to use it to make us disappear from the universe's memory." "Well, that's just charming," Jax said, standing up and dusting off his knees. "So, it's not enough for them to try and kill us. Now they want to make sure nobody even remembers we were here. Sounds like an ex trying to delete all your pictures from social media," Taylor quipped. "Except this ex is armed and dangerous," Jax added. "All right, we need to get this artifact back to the ship. Figure out what makes it tick and how to stop it. And we need to do it before the Syndicate realizes we're here. Captain, I hate to break it to you, but subtlety isn't exactly our strong suit," Taylor observed with a wry smile. "Subtlety is for people who like losing gracefully," Jax replied, signaling the rest of the team to fall back to their extraction point. As they began their retreat through the crystalline maze, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The sensation was akin to having an itch you couldn't quite reach, and it set his teeth on edge. Moments later, his unease was confirmed when a shadow moved among the glassy trunks, followed by the unmistakable sound of a weapon charging. "Scatter!" Jax shouted, diving behind a jagged column just as a bolt of energy sizzled through the air where his head had been. The team sprang into action like a well-oiled, albeit slightly tarnished, machine. Taylor's cybernetic enhancements kicked in, her movements swift and precise as she returned fire with her own blaster. "Did you call ahead and book us a welcoming party, Captain?" Taylor yelled over the din of exchanged fire. "Left it to the travel agent," Jax replied, rolling to another position and taking a shot at one of the syndicate goons. You know how they always mess up the details. Ethan, who had taken cover behind a particularly sturdy crystal, was fumbling with a handheld device. "I've got an idea," he yelled, his voice a mix of excitement and terror. "As long as it doesn't involve sacrificing virgins or summoning ancient spirits, I'm all ears." Jax responded, ducking as another bolt scorched the air. No ritual sacrifice required," Ethan assured, poking his head out just long enough to input some final commands. "It's a disorienter. They used it to confuse prey. Should buy us a few moments. Moments are all we need," Taylor said, taking down an enemy with a well-placed shot to the knee. "Let's hope your gizmo isn't as reliable as your scanner." Ethan pressed a button, and the air shimmered with a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the crystals. The effect was immediate. The syndicate's aim went wild, their shots scattering harmlessly into the forest. "Nice work, Doc," Jax called, motioning the team to move. "Time to make our exit." "Everyone fall back," the team regrouped, using the confusion to sprint through the crystalline labyrinth. With each step, the artifact seemed to pulse with an energy that was both unsettling and captivating, like a seductress with a knife behind her back. As they neared their extraction point, the ground shook violently, knocking several of them off their feet. Jax scrambled up, swearing under his breath. "Now what?" Out of the dust and debris emerged a hulking figure, clad in armor that reflected the crystal shards like a disco ball from hell. The syndicate leader, undoubtedly. Captain Jax Arlen, the figure intoned, voice deep and resonant like a funeral bell. "You're not supposed to be here." Jax flashed his most winning grin, the kind that got him slapped in 7 systems. "Funny, I thought the same thing about you." The leader's helmet tilted, as if considering this. "Give me the artifact and your deaths will be swift." "That's a real tempting offer," Jax said, "but I'm gonna have to pass. I've got this thing about letting genocidal maniacs have their way." The leader raised an arm, the weapon embedded within it humming ominously. "On second thought," Jax added quickly, "let me introduce you to my friend MS. Vex." Taylor stepped forward, her own weapon ready. "Charmed, I'm sure. Now, are we going to dance, or are you just going to stand there looking menacing?" With that, the tension snapped like an overstretched wire, and the air filled with the chaos of battle once more. Jax dove to the side, firing as he moved, each shot a desperate hope against the armored giant. The rest of the team followed suit, scattering to positions that offered the illusion of cover. The syndicate leader moved with surprising speed, returning fire with a precision that spoke of both experience and overconfidence. "We can't take him head-on," Jax shouted, ducking behind a column that was quickly disintegrating under fire. "Taylor, any ideas?" "Always, Captain," she replied, glancing at Ethan. "Doc, remember that trick with the disorienter?" Ethan nodded, fumbling with his device again. "I can overcharge it, but it'll fry the circuits after one use." "Let's hope one is all we need," Jax said, taking a breath to steady his nerves. On 3, as Taylor laid down suppressive fire, Ethan adjusted the settings with shaking hands. Jax counted down, each number a heartbeat in the frenzied chaos. 3, Ethan activated the device and the world seemed to shudder. The leader staggered, armor flickering as its system struggled to compensate for the unexpected interference. Now, Jax yelled, leading the charge. The team surged forward, weapons blazing as they closed the gap. Despite its size, the armored figure flinched under the onslaught, unsteady and disoriented. Taylor's shot found a weak point, a joint in the armor that sparked and smoked. The leader let out a roar, a sound of rage and defiance, but it was too late. The team had the momentum, each shot chipping away at the Syndicate's invulnerability. With a final, desperate burst, Jax's blaster struck the weapon's power source. The ensuing explosion knocked them all back, a wave of heat and light that left their ears ringing. As the dust settled, Jax rose to his feet, wincing at the bruises he'd feel later. The Syndicate leader lay still, the armor now nothing more than a scorched husk. "Well," Taylor commented, brushing debris from her shoulder, "that was fun. Let's never do it again." Jax chuckled, relief mixing with exhaustion. "I'll drink to that. Now let's get out of here before the rest of the welcoming committee shows up." With the artifact safely in hand, the team made their way to the extraction point, leaving behind the crystalline battlefield and the grim reminder of what was at stake. As they boarded their ship, Jax couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. The Syndicate might want to erase their history, but as long as they were around, humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. And knowing his luck, that fight was only just beginning. The crystal forest loomed around them like a bad acid trip gone sentient, jagged and glinting with a malice all its own. Captain Jax Arlen led his motley crew further into the shimmering maze, each step a gamble between progress and impalement. "Can't wait to see what kills us first," Taylor Vex muttered, her scanner flashing erratically as if it was having an existential crisis. "Maybe we'll get lucky and it'll be quick," Ree Calder piped up, tech genius and resident optimist, if by optimist you meant someone who assumes everything will explode eventually. "Quick would be a mercy," Yoren Vex, the linguist with an allergy to optimism, grumbled. "I'd settle for slightly less embarrassing." "Relax," Jax said, his voice as casual as his grip on reality. "If we die out here, at least we'll be part of a cautionary tale for future idiots." Assuming anyone's left to hear it, Yoren shot back, eyeing a particularly menacing crystal formation like it had just insulted his mother. Ree adjusted her goggles, a futile attempt to keep the crystal reflections from blinding her. "Given our luck, the story will probably be about how we died chasing a shiny rock." "Ah, the noble quest for shiny things," Jax mused, drawing his blaster as they approached a narrow path. "History's full of such tales." "Well, we're making history ourselves," Taylor said, shaking her malfunctioning scanner as if it owed her money. "Assuming the Zinth don't erase us from it first." The mention of the Zinth was enough to sober even the most reckless of adventurers. An advanced race with a penchant for rewriting civilizations, their interest in the artifact was a problem of genocidal proportions. "Speaking of our overzealous editors," Jax said, his eyes scanning the crystalline horizon, "anyone else getting the feeling we're not alone out here?" "Yeah," Taylor replied, her voice as dry as the desert back home. "It's like being at a party where you know no one but someone's definitely watching you dance." Just as they rounded a bend, a mechanical whirring filled the air, a sound that could only belong to one thing: Zinth drones. Sleek and deadly, the drones hovered into view like a swarm of malevolent bees with a taste for blood. "Crap," Ree hissed, diving for cover behind a jagged shard. "I hate bees." "Not the time," Ree, Jax barked, signaling the others to find cover. The drones were armed, their energy weapons already humming with ominous intent. "Yoren, any chance you can sweet-talk them?" Taylor asked, already knowing the answer. "Sure," Yoren replied, adjusting his translator device. "If by sweet-talk you mean beg for our lives." The drones opened fire, lasers slicing through the crystal forest with the grace of a chainsaw at a topiary exhibition. The team scattered, each member finding whatever meager cover they could. "Ree, can you knock them offline?" Jax yelled over the chaos, returning fire with the enthusiasm of a man who knew he was outgunned. "Working on it." Ree shouted back, her fingers flying over the controls of her portable hacking rig. But it's like trying to hack a bank vault with a toothpick. Do I look like I have time for metaphors? Jax snapped, ducking behind a column that was rapidly disintegrating. Taylor's blaster barked, taking down a drone that had strayed too close. One down, God knows how many to go. Saving ammo here, Taylor, Jax warned. We're going to need it, sure, because we're definitely going to survive this, Taylor quipped, reloading with practiced ease. Positive thinking, Yoren drawled, that's the spirit. Ree's fingers danced across her console, the device sputtering and sparking as she wrestled with the Zinth security protocols. Got it, she exclaimed, just as a volley of laser fire turned her cover into a crystal confetti. The air shimmered as the drones faltered, their systems blinking out under Ree's digital assault. One by one, they crashed to the ground with a series of satisfying thuds. Nice work, Ree, Jax said, offering her a hand up. Remind me to buy you a drink when we get back. Assuming we don't die horribly in the next 5 minutes. Hey, we haven't died yet, Ree replied, brushing herself off. That's practically a win in my book. The team regrouped, breathless but alive, a rare state in their line of work. Jax took a moment to assess the situation, the enormity of what they faced settling over him like a shroud. All right, people, he said, his tone as grim as the news anchor who announces the apocalypse. We've got a problem, you mean besides the homicidal drones? Taylor asked, arching an eyebrow. Well, that, and the fact that the Zinth want to rewrite us out of existence, Jax replied. We need to find the source of this artifact's power and figure out how to neutralize it before they do. Easier said than done, Yoren commented, studying the alien inscriptions with the intensity of a man trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. The answer's got to be here somewhere, Ethan chimed in, his enthusiasm undeterred by the near-death experience. We just have to look harder. Great pep talk, Doc, Taylor said, rolling her eyes. Next you'll be telling us we can fly if we just believe hard enough. Hey, if we survive this, I'll believe anything, Ree said, eyeing the battered landscape with wary eyes. Their banter was cut short by a low rumble that shook the very ground beneath them. It was a sound that promised doom, or, at the very least, a significant inconvenience. I don't like where this is going, Yoren said, his voice tight with apprehension. Join the club, Jax muttered, gesturing for the team to press on. Let's keep moving before the Zinth decide to up the ante. They continued deeper into the forest, the crystal formations becoming denser, as if the landscape itself conspired to keep its secrets hidden. The air buzzed with tension, each step bringing them closer to the heart of the mystery, and further from the safety of ignorance. So, Captain, Yoren said after a stretch of uneasy silence, what's Plan B if this doesn't pan out, Plan B? Jax repeated, glancing back with a humorless grin. Who said we even had a Plan A? Good to know we're winging it, Taylor remarked, her expression a mix of cynicism and resignation. That always works out well. Speak for yourself, Ree said, adjusting her equipment. Winging it is half the fun. You need a better definition of fun, Taylor replied, keeping her eyes peeled for any signs of trouble. Preferably one that doesn't involve imminent death. The sound of distant engines reverberated through the crystal forest, a reminder of the relentless pursuit that shadowed their every move. The Zinth weren't the type to let their prey slip away easily. Let's pick up the pace, Jax urged. Those drones were the appetizer. Main course is bound to be worse. Speaking of which, Ethan interjected, I think I've found something. He pointed to a set of symbols etched into a particularly large crystal, the markings distinct and purposeful. What is it, Doc? Jax asked, moving to join him. A map, Ethan replied, his voice eager, or at least a guide of some kind. It leads to a central chamber, a focal point for the artifact's energy. Great, Jax said, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the dread. Let's see where it takes us. I just hope it's not leading us into a trap, Taylor warned, ever the voice of caution. Only one way to find out, Jax said, setting his jaw with determination. With Ethan leading the way, they followed the path laid out in the ancient symbols, each step carrying them further into the unknown. The air grew colder, tinged with a metallic taste that hinted at powerful forces at work. "Anyone else feel like they are walking into the mouth of a monster?" Ree asked, her voice hushed. "All the time," Yorin replied, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. "It's the teeth I'm worried about. Let's just hope this monster's toothless," Jax said, though he knew better than to count on it. As they pressed on, the crystalline structures began to pulse with a soft, ethereal glow, as if they were alive and aware of the intruders. It was beautiful in a way that only something truly lethal could be. "Captain," Ethan said, stopping short as they entered a vast chamber. "I think we've found it." The room was vast, the walls lined with crystals that hummed with energy. At its center stood a monolithic structure, its surface etched with symbols and circuits that thrummed with alien power. "This is it," Yorin breathed, awe and fear mingling in his voice. "Well, we wanted to find the heart of the beast," Taylor said, her tone sardonic. "Here it is, beating and all. Now what?" Ree asked, the enormity of their task sinking in. "Now," Jax replied, his resolve hardening, "we figure out how to stop it." The team gathered around the monolith, each of them acutely aware of the stakes. The weight of the universe seemed to press down on them, a reminder of the potential cost of failure. "Ethan, can you make sense of this?" Jax asked, gesturing to the alien script. "It's not just a record," Ethan replied, his fingers tracing the symbols. "It's a control matrix. The Synth can use it to initiate the erasure. Then we have to disable it," Jax said, his voice firm. "Easier said than done," Ree cautioned, pulling out her tools. "But I'll give it a shot." As Ree set to work, the rest of the team kept watch, every sense on high alert. The tension was palpable, a ticking bomb that could explode with the slightest misstep. Fingers crossed, Taylor murmured, her grip on her weapon steady. "Let's hope we don't need more than that," Jax said, his gaze fixed on the monolith. They worked in tense silence, each second stretching into eternity. The hum of the crystals grew louder, a reminder that time was slipping away. "Almost there," Ree said, her voice a mix of concentration and urgency. Jax nodded, though he knew better than to relax. They still had to get out alive, a feat easier pledged than performed. With a final, defiant spark, Ree's tools found purchase, severing the connection that linked the monolith to its deadly purpose. "Got it," she exclaimed, relief flooding her voice. "Now let's get the hell out of here before we're buried," Jax ordered, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The team turned to leave, each of them aware that escape was only the first step in a battle far from over. As they retraced their steps through the crystal labyrinth, the weight of their mission pressed on them more heavily than ever. "Here's hoping the Synth have better things to do than chase us," Yorin said, though none of them believed it. "They'll chase," Jax replied, his tone unyielding. "But they'll find us ready." With that, they emerged from the crystalline maze, each of them bearing the marks of their ordeal, scars both seen and unseen. They had bought time, nothing more. But in a universe teetering on the brink of erasure, time was the most valuable currency of all. And as long as they had it, they'd keep fighting. Because in the end, survival meant raising a metaphorical middle finger to the cosmos, and Jax Arlen wouldn't have it any other way. Jax Arlen was beginning to suspect that the universe had a sick sense of humor. Here they were, fresh from disabling an ancient alien monolith capable of wiping out civilizations, and now confronted with a hidden human base buried beneath a forest of glittering death. If irony had a physical form, it would probably slap him on the back and buy him a drink, just before poisoning it. "Is it just me, or does anyone else feel like we're the butt of some cosmic joke?" Jax mused, eyeing the entrance to the base, a rather unassuming hatch partially hidden amongst the crystal spikes. "Welcome to the universe's comedy club. We're the headliners," Taylor retorted, her sarcasm as sharp as the crystals surrounding them. "Well, at least they didn't have to hire a bouncer," Ree chimed in, gesturing to the natural defenses. "Unless you count the homicidal drones. Yeah, but they didn't even check my ID," Jax said, squinting at the hatch. "Think it's safe?" Depends on your definition of safe, Yorin replied, adjusting his glasses as if that might help him see the future. If by safe you mean filled with potential death traps, then sure. Only one way to know for sure, Ree shrugged, already working her magic on the entrance controls. Sparks flew, but she maintained her usual optimism. Fingers crossed it doesn't explode. Ah, the Ree Calder catchphrase, Taylor muttered. If I had a credit for every time. The hatch creaked ominously as it slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor leading into the depths below. It wasn't exactly inviting, more like the kind of place you'd expect to find rats with laser guns. After you, fearless leader, Yorin said, motioning for Jax to lead the way. Thanks, I feel so loved, Jax replied, stepping cautiously inside. The corridor's stale air was a stark contrast to the biting cold outside, and it didn't take long for the rest of the team to follow. Feels like home, Taylor commented, grimacing at the rusted walls. If home was a long-abandoned bunker with questionable structural integrity. Cozy, Ethan added, his enthusiasm for ancient places not dulled by the obvious perils. Think of all the history in these walls. If we find any skeletons in closets, I'm out, Ree warned, her eyes scanning for anything that might want to kill them. The corridor opened into a larger chamber, filled with long-dead control panels and flickering screens. Dust coated every surface like a second skin, a testament to just how long this place had been hidden. Well, at least it's not as dusty as my sense of direction, Jax commented, eyeing the labyrinth of consoles. Think there's anything useful here? Only if we can work out what all this stuff does, Ethan replied, already examining the nearest panel with the fervor of a child unwrapping birthday presents. This is amazing. Yeah, amazing, Taylor echoed, unimpressed. But will it help us stop the Zinth from turning us into cosmic roadkill? Only one way to find out, Ree said, her fingers dancing over a control panel. Let's wake Sleeping Beauty. As Ree applied power, the room hummed to life, the screens flickering with a hesitant glow that spoke of long-neglected systems struggling back into action. A holographic display sputtered to life at the center of the room, displaying a complex puzzle of symbols and diagrams. Looks like our ancestors were fans of complicated locks, Yorin observed. Great. Anyone bring their decoder ring? Jax asked, squinting at the shifting patterns. Or is this where we just guess and hope for the best? Let's not make it a guessing game, Ethan said, already pulling up a database on his handheld. These symbols match some of the inscriptions we saw outside. It could be a key. Well then, Professor, Taylor said, crossing her arms. Let's see if your history degree saves the day. Ethan worked at deciphering the ancient symbols, his excitement tempered by the weight of their collective lives hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, Ree and Yorin examined the various consoles, hoping to glean some insight into the base's purpose. If I'm reading this right, Yorin began, these puzzles were designed as a form of security measure. To ensure only a select few could access the information stored here. Security through obscurity, Taylor quipped. Love it. Typical human paranoia, Ree said, tinkering with another set of controls. We create something to protect us, and then hide it so well that even we can't find it. Story of my life, Jax muttered, watching Ethan work. How's it coming, Doc? I think I'm close, Ethan replied, furrowing his brow as he made another adjustment. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with your eyes closed. Sounds like fun, Jax said dryly. Let us know when you've cracked it. As Ethan continued his work, the rest of the team remained on edge, the pressure of their mission weighing heavily on them. The Zinth weren't known for their patience, and every minute spent here increased the likelihood of discovery. Anyone else feel like we're sitting ducks? Taylor asked, glancing nervously at the entrance. I'd rather not be roasted. It's not exactly high on my to-do list either, Ree replied, adjusting her tools. But we've got to trust Ethan. Trust me, Ethan said, his voice full of determination. I've almost got it. Just a little more time. As he spoke, the holographic display shifted, the symbols aligning into a coherent pattern. A soft chime sounded and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden data core. "Bingo," Ethan said, grinning triumphantly. "We're in." "About time," Jack said, moving to inspect the data core. "Now all we need is the info on how to stop the Zinth. Let's hope it's not in an even more cryptic language," Yoren said, though his relief was palpable. Re-plugged into the data core, her console lighting up with streams of encrypted information. The team huddled around her, each of them acutely aware of the stakes. "This is it," Ree said, her fingers flying over the controls. "We've got what we need to disable the Zinth's rewriting capabilities. Got to hand it to our ancestors," Taylor said, her voice tinged with admiration. "They might have been paranoid, but they sure left us a hell of a gift. Hopefully, it's not the kind of gift with strings attached," Yoren cautioned, ever the pessimist. "Let's worry about that later," Jack said, his tone firm. "Right now, we need to get this data back to the ship and figure out how to use it." "Agreed," Ree said, transferring the data to a portable drive. "But let's not kid ourselves. The Zinth won't take this lying down." Jax nodded, his resolve hardening. They had the means to fight back now, but it was only the beginning. The Zinth wouldn't rest until they were eradicated, and he wasn't about to let that happen. "Let's get moving," Jax ordered, leading the way back through the maze of corridors. "And keep your eyes open. We're not out of the woods yet." As they retraced their steps, the weight of their mission hung over them like a storm cloud. The forest of crystals loomed in the distance, a glittering reminder of the danger they faced. "So, Captain," Taylor said, breaking the tense silence. "What's our next move?" "Next move?" Jax replied, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "We get back to the ship, figure out how to use this data, and hope the Zinth don't catch us first." "Sounds like a plan," Ree said, her voice steady. "Sort of. Better than no plan at all," Yoren said, his tone resigned. As they exited the base, the crystal forest stretched out before them like a minefield waiting to explode. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but they had a fighting chance now, a small, precious sliver of hope in a universe intent on snuffing them out. "Let's just hope our luck holds," Taylor murmured, her grip on her weapon reassuring. "Luck or not, we've got each other," Jax replied, his gaze sweeping over his team. "And that's all we need." With that, they pressed on, each step carrying them closer to a confrontation that would determine the fate of worlds. They had come this far together, and they would see it through to the end, no matter the cost. And if the universe wanted to throw more curveballs their way, well, they'd just swing right back. After all, they were only human. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, decided that peace wasn't on today's menu. Jax Arlen and his ragtag band of misfits had barely set foot outside the hidden base when the first sign of trouble arrived. It wasn't subtle, but then the Zinth never were. A low, ominous hum filled the air, like the world's most uninvited party guest. "I think that's our cue to leave," Jax suggested, not bothering to hide the edge in his voice. "And by leave, I mean run like hell. Anyone else feel like we're the universe's chew toy?" Taylor quipped, her eyes scanning the shimmering tree line for incoming threats. "More like the chew toy's chew toy," Yoren muttered, adjusting his glasses with a resigned sigh. The crystal forest seemed to pulse with malevolent intent, the jagged formations glinting in the dim light like teeth waiting to snap shut. Their hard-won data clutched tightly in their hands. The crew made a break for it, sprinting across the crystalline terrain with the grace of drunken giraffes. Ree, who was usually the embodiment of optimism, had her faith tested when a drone the size of a small car appeared, its sleek body humming with deadly energy. "Oh, great. They brought reinforcements," she remarked dryly, diving for cover behind a particularly pointy crystal. As if on cue, the drone opened fire, a volley of energy blasts that turned the ground where they'd been standing into a molten puddle of death. "You know," Jax shouted over the noise, "I've always wanted to go out in a blaze of glory. But this isn't exactly what I had in mind." "Could be worse," Taylor replied, her sarcasm unyielding as ever. "We could be out here with no plan at all, Doctor." Ethan Cross, who was more at home deciphering dusty inscriptions than dodging high-tech death machines, tried to keep up, his historical enthusiasm dampened by the very real prospect of becoming a footnote himself. "Any chance these things have an off switch?" he asked, ducking behind a jagged formation with Yoren. "If they do, it's probably written in ancient Zinth," Ree shouted back, frantically working her handheld device to jam their signals. "But I've got a better idea." Jax, crouched behind a crystal that looked like it could double as a murder weapon, gave a grim nod. "I'm all ears." Ree flashed a quick, manic grin. "The trees, they've got a network, like a neural web. We could tap into it and use it against them." Jax finished, catching on. "You think it'll work?" "Only one way to find out," Ree replied, already focused on her console. The Zinth drones didn't seem keen on waiting patiently while they brainstormed. Another round of blasts shattered a nearby crystal, sending shards flying. "We're sitting ducks out here," Taylor yelled, her usual sardonic demeanor cracking just enough to let through a sliver of urgency. "Then let's move," Jax ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. He motioned for the team to split up, forcing the drones to divide their fire. "Ethan, Yoren, find cover and help re-rig that network. Taylor, you're with me. Let's give him something to aim at." "Nothing like being the bait," Taylor grumbled, but she was already moving, her feet crunching over the fractured terrain as she darted to Jax's side. They weaved through the crystalline forest, drawing the drones' attention and firepower, each near miss a reminder of their mortality. Jax could almost feel the universe watching, laughing at their willingness to play its twisted game. Meanwhile, Ethan and Yoren scrambled to set up a perimeter, re-hacking into the network with an intensity that bordered on zealotry. "Talk to me," Jax demanded, knowing they didn't have time for niceties. "It's like trying to hotwire a starship with a spoon," Ree muttered, her fingers dancing over the device. "But I think I can create a feedback loop, fry their circuits." "Do it," Jax encouraged. "Whatever it takes." The drones, relentless as ever, continued their assault, their metallic forms darting between the trees with lethal precision. Jax and Taylor pressed on, dodging and returning fire when they could, their banter a fragile bulwark against the encroaching dread. "You know, Jax," Taylor said, her words punctuated by the sharp crack of her weapon, "when I signed up for this, I thought we'd be exploring the galaxy, not running from homicidal tech." "Adventure's what you make it," Jax replied, managing a grim smile. "And right now I'm making it out alive." Back at the makeshift command post, Ree's console emitted a series of encouraging beeps. "Got it," she yelled, her excitement barely contained. Prepare for fireworks. The crystalline forest, so serene and deadly just moments before, flickered with light as Ree initiated the feedback loop. The drones, caught in the sudden surge of energy, convulsed midair, their systems overwhelmed by the influx of raw power. One by one they plummeted to the ground, their threat neutralized. "Not bad, Calder," Yoren said, his tone bordering on impressed. "Remind me not to get on your bad side." "Noted," Ree replied, her relief palpable. "But let's not celebrate just yet." "Agreed," Jax said, regrouping with his team. The crystal forest, now devoid of its mechanical guardians, seemed almost tranquil by comparison. But Jax knew better than to let his guard down. The Zinth weren't ones to give up easily. "So what's next?" Ethan asked, his curiosity unsated despite the chaos. "We use what we've got and hit them back where it hurts," Jax said, determination etched into every line of his face. "We've got the data. Now we need to figure out how to use it to disable their rewriting tech." "Sounds like a hell of a task," Taylor remarked, though her skepticism was tinged with hope. "But at least we've got something to work with." The team began their trek back to the ship, their movements cautious and deliberate. The crystal forest loomed around them, its silent beauty a stark contrast to the violence it had witnessed. "Think we'll ever catch a break?" Yoren asked, his tone more rhetorical than hopeful. "Doubt it," Jax replied, his voice firm. "But we'll make our own." As they moved through the crystalline landscape, the weight of their mission hung over them, a constant reminder of the stakes. The data they carried was their only hope, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide against a seemingly unstoppable enemy. "Hey, Jax," Ree called out, her voice cutting through the silence. "Thanks for trusting me back there." "Don't mention it," Jax replied, a hint of warmth in his otherwise gruff demeanor. "Just doing what we do best, running headlong into danger." Together, Taylor added, her usual sarcasm softened into something resembling camaraderie. They continued on, the path ahead uncertain but the bond between them unyielding. Each step brought them closer to salvation, or so they hoped. But in a universe that seemed hell-bent on their destruction, hope was a luxury they couldn't afford to lose. As they neared the sleek, battered hulk of their ship, Jax took a moment to glance back at the forest, its crystalline spires glittering in the fading light. The Zinth would come again, of that he was certain, but they'd be ready. "Let's get this data analyzed," he said, a new resolve in his voice. "We've got a war to win." And with that they boarded the ship, their future uncertain but their spirit undaunted. The universe might delight in throwing them curveballs, but if it was a fight it wanted, it was a fight it would get. Because if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was defying the odds. And they were just getting started. The universe must have had a good laugh at the crew's expense. No sooner had they settled back into the ship's dimly lit cockpit, ready to dissect the priceless data they'd snagged, than the comms crackled to life with a voice as smooth and irritating as a politician with a hidden agenda. "Captain Jax Arlen, I believe you have something that belongs to us." The voice oozed through the speakers, dripping with smugness. "An associate of yours, Yorin Vex," I believe. Taylor looked up from her station, her eyes narrowing like lasers. Well, that escalated quickly. Jax clenched his jaw, 1,000 curses forming on his tongue. "What did you do?" He barked into the microphone, knowing full well there was no good answer coming. "We simply facilitated a transfer of sorts. Yorin is unharmed for now. But let's not pretend we're not all adults here. We know how these things work. You want him back, you bring us the data." The universe wasn't just chewing them like gum, it was savoring the flavor before spitting them out. "Great. Just great," Taylor muttered. "They couldn't have picked any other day." Ethan, ever the reluctant optimist, piped up. "Maybe we can work something out. Like a trade." "Yeah," Jack snorted. "We trade them our lives, one bullet at a time." Ree's eyes darted from her console to the crew. "This feels like one of those no-win scenarios they used to talk about. And I don't like those." Jax rubbed his temples, trying to think past the pounding headache forming. "Stupid Zinth. Should have known they'd play dirty." "They always do," Taylor said, her voice as dry as the wasteland outside. "All right," Jax said, trying to summon the resolve that had seen them through worse, though it was a short list. "Ree, can you scramble our location? I want them playing hide-and-seek in a black hole." "I'll give it my best shot, Captain," Ree said, her fingers flying over the controls. Ethan leaned in, his brow furrowed. "Jax, should we really risk it?" "I mean, they have Yorin," Jax sighed, feeling the weight of leadership bearing down on him like a gravity well. "We don't have a lot of options, Ethan. We can't just hand over the data. It's the only leverage we've got." "Leverage?" Taylor interrupted, making a face. "We're holding a slingshot in a cannon fight. Then we'll have to aim high," Jax replied, scanning the room. "We find a way to get Yorin back without giving up the goods. It's not impossible." "Oh, sure," Taylor said, rolling her eyes. "Just like it's not impossible to floss with barbed wire." Ree glanced over, her usual optimism somewhat frayed but still intact. "I've tapped into the Zinth's comms grid, trying to triangulate their signal. Might take a bit." "Take your time," Jax said. "Just not too much of it." Meanwhile, Yorin himself was experiencing the kind of hospitality that came with metal restraints and a highly impersonal interrogation room. He sat in a chair that might have been designed by someone with a grudge against the concept of comfort. The Zinth, in their infinite wisdom, had decided to forego subtlety and jumped straight to intimidation tactics. "Nice place you've got here," Yorin quipped, adjusting his glasses with the one finger the restraints allowed him. "Really captures the whole dungeon chic vibe." The Zinth operative across from him, all sharp angles and unreadable expressions, didn't bite. You enjoy humor under duress. Yorin repeated, feigning ignorance. I thought this was a spa treatment. The operative leaned forward, evidently not amused. Your crew has something of Ior's. You will help us retrieve it. Yorin shrugged as best as he could, considering the circumstances. And here I thought you invited me here to catch up. The operative's patience, if it ever existed, was wearing thin. We can be persuasive. Yeah, well, Yorin said, raising an eyebrow. My crew can be a real pain in the ass when they want to be. Back on the ship, the rest of the crew was feeling the pressure. Jax paced the cramped quarters, each step a reminder of the stakes. Any luck, Ree? He asked, hoping for a miracle. We're in luck, Ree said, her voice a mix of relief and surprise. I've got a fix on Yorin's signal. Looks like they're holding him in some sort of facility not too far from here. Jax clapped his hands as if that would shake loose the perfect plan. All right, here's what we're going to do. We need a distraction to draw their attention away from Yorin. Then we'll sneak in, grab him, and get the hell out before they know what hit them. Won't they expect that? Ethan asked, voicing the doubt everyone felt. Probably, Jax said with a shrug. But I'm betting they won't expect us to pull it off. Taylor cracked her knuckles, a grin forming on her face. I've got just the thing. It's loud, obnoxious, and guaranteed to piss them off. Sounds perfect, Jax said, clapping her on the back. Let's get moving. The plan, such as it was, unfolded with the kind of haphazard precision that only desperate people could muster. Taylor's distraction involved a concoction of explosives and pyrotechnics that would have made a fireworks manufacturer proud or deeply concerned. As the Zinth scrambled to deal with the unexpected chaos, Jax and the rest of the crew made their move, slipping into the facility with the practiced ease of people who'd broken into more places than they cared to admit. Feels like old times, Taylor muttered, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. Yeah, Jax said, except this time, let's try not to blow up the exit. They navigated the maze of corridors, Ree's readings guiding them to where Yorin was being held. The facility was a testament to Zinth efficiency, clean, sterile, and utterly soulless. Just the kind of place where terrible things happened without anyone batting an eye. Think they'll throw us a welcome party? Taylor asked, her voice low but carrying the familiar edge of sarcasm. Will RSVP know? Jax replied, stopping outside a door that Ree indicated was their destination. Ready? Ethan nodded, a determined gleam in his eye. Let's get our guy. Jax kicked in the door with more zeal than finesse, and the crew stormed inside. Yorin was there, looking as unimpressed as ever, his eyes lighting up with recognition. Took you long enough, he deadpanned. Traffic was murder, Taylor shot back, moving to free him from his restraints. Nice of you to drop by, Yorin said, getting to his feet. Thought I might have to start enjoying their hospitality. Let's not stick around for the after-party, Jax said, motioning for the door. They moved quickly, retracing their steps through the facility, Taylor's explosive handiwork still keeping the Zinth occupied. It wasn't long before they encountered resistance, a few surprised guards who were clearly not expecting company. Jax and Taylor dispatched them with a combination of skill and desperate urgency, the kind of fighting that relied more on instinct than strategy. The kind that came with a countdown ticking in their heads. We need to move. Jax shouted as they barreled through the corridors, the exit tantalizingly close. As they emerged into the open air, the Zinth facility behind them re-tapped into the ship's systems, ready to extract them. Nice work, everyone, Jax said, not pausing to admire their handiwork. But this isn't over. They piled into the ship, the engines already humming with life, and Jax set a course away from the facility, away from the immediate threat. As the ship lifted off, leaving behind a swirl of dust and chaos, Jax finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. All right, he said, looking at his crew, his friends. We've got Yorin back, and we've still got the data. That's a win in my book. Yorin adjusted his glasses, a ghost of a smile appearing. Thanks, Captain. I knew you'd find a way. Yeah, well, don't make a habit of getting kidnapped, Jax replied, trying to sound stern but failing miserably. Sounds like a plan, Yoren said, his voice dry as ever. Taylor stretched, her nonchalance returning. So what now? More running, more shooting, or do we finally get to take a nap? Jax chuckled, the tension easing a fraction. Let's grab a breather, figure out what this data tells us, and then we'll decide the next move. Ree nodded, a hint of her usual optimism returning. Whatever it is, we'll handle it. We always do. They settled into the ship's confines, the universe still as unpredictable and unfriendly as ever. But for now, they were together, and that was enough. Hey, Jax, Taylor said, her voice carrying a note of curiosity. Think we'll ever catch a break? Probably not, Jax said with a shrug, a wry grin forming. But that's never stopped us before. As the ship soared through the stars, the crew allowed themselves a moment of camaraderie, their laughter and banter filling the space between them. The universe might be out to get them, but they weren't about to give it the satisfaction. Because in the end, they were only human. And that was more than enough. As the dust settled from their latest escapade, the crew found themselves in the cockpit, a space that served as their home, war room, and occasional psychiatric help session. Jax leaned against the wall, trying to look more confident about their situation than he felt. It was a talent he'd nearly perfected, much like pretending to remember birthdays. "All right, team," he began, clapping his hands together in a mock display of enthusiasm. "We got Yoren back, so yay us. But let's not pop the champagne just yet." "Champagne?" Taylor snorted, her scanner clutched under her arm like a prized pet. "I'd settle for a drink without a moldy aftertaste. Or a year-old expiration date," Yoren added, adjusting his glasses like it might somehow clarify their situation. He was grateful to be free, but not so grateful that he'd lost his sarcasm. Ree, always the optimist, and likely the only one who didn't need coffee to function, was already tapping away at her console. "Good news," she announced, her voice annoyingly chipper. "I think I've found a way to turn the crystal network out there into our own personal fortress." Jax raised an eyebrow, trying to mask his surprise with curiosity. "Go on, Ree." "I'm all ears, and that's saying something with this crew," she beamed, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "The crystals act like a natural energy conductor. If we can harness and channel that energy, we could create a barrier that'd fry anything electronic trying to get through it." "Like a bug zapper for homicidal drones?" Taylor asked, amusement flickering across her face. "I like it. Shock therapy for the universe. I'm guessing this plan also involves not accidentally frying ourselves," Ethan interjected, the voice of cautious optimism. "I mean, I'm all for a spectacular suicide mission, but I'd rather it be someone else's." Ree waved a hand dismissively. "Details, details. I'm sure we can work that part out. It's just a matter of hacking the energy flow." "Easy as pie." "Yeah, if pie was a sentient death trap," Yoren muttered, though there was a hint of appreciation in his gaze. "But damn if it doesn't sound like a fun challenge." "So," Jax said, his voice taking on a commanding tone, which meant he was winging it even more than usual. "We've got a plan, sort of. Let's make sure the Zinth realize we're not the best snacks on the menu." The crew set to work, each member diving into their respective tasks with the kind of enthusiasm that could only be fueled by desperation and the threat of imminent demise. Ree led the effort, her fingers dancing over the controls with a speed that suggested she'd been raised by hyperactive ferrets. "What if this doesn't work?" Ethan asked quietly, watching Ree's progress with a mixture of awe and concern. Jax shrugged, his expression casually dismissive. "Then we join the ever-growing list of people who failed to outsmart the universe. But at least we'll give it one hell of a headache first." "Optimism as sharp as ever, Captain," Taylor said, glancing up from her scanner, which was currently sounding like a dying electronic seagull. "We should embroider that on a pillow. Or a gravestone," Yoren suggested dryly. Meanwhile, Ree's focus was unwavering, her eyes glued to the console as she coaxed and coerced the crystal network into compliance. She had a knack for this, turning the chaotic into the controllable. It was why they kept her around, despite her tendency to see the glass as half full even when it was clearly cracked. Think the Zinth will be surprised? Taylor asked, leaning back in her chair with a satisfied smirk. Surprised, Jack said, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous sort of mirth. I'm hoping they'll be downright confused. Maybe even a little embarrassed. The atmosphere in the cockpit was tense but charged with a strange, rebellious kind of energy. This plan was madness, but then again, so was any plan that involved navigating a universe intent on making your life hell. All right, crew, Jack said, his voice laced with that gritty determination that somehow made the impossible seem slightly less so. Let's light this candle. The crew moved with the kind of synchronized chaos that defined them, like a well-oiled machine, if that machine was held together by duct tape and sheer stubbornness. Ree's fingers flew over the controls, her eyes a mix of concentration and excitement. The ship hummed with life, resonating with the newfound energy coursing through it. Outside, the crystal forest was alive, shimmering with a dangerous beauty that seemed almost otherworldly. Power levels are stable, Ree reported, her voice tense but confident. Looks like we're in business. And not the kind that ends with us in body bags, Yoren added, with a cautious optimism that could almost pass for hope. Jax grinned, the kind of grin that suggested he'd just gotten away with something he really shouldn't have. Let's make sure the Zinth know we're not interested in their special brand of hospitality. As the crew watched, the crystals crackled to life, creating a barrier of light and energy that surrounded their ship. It was a stunning display, a fortress made of stars and stone, ready to defy anything that dared challenge it. Beautiful, Ethan breathed, his usual reserve cracking in the face of genuine awe. And deadly, Taylor added, a mischievous grin playing on her lips. Just like me. The ship soared through the crystal forest, the barrier holding steady as they pushed forward, each moment a testament to human ingenuity and stubbornness. Looks like we've got ourselves a fighting chance, Jack said, relief mingling with determination. Let's not waste it. The Zinth were going to regret underestimating them. That much was certain. But as the crew watched the stars blur by, there was a sense of camaraderie that couldn't be shaken even by the vast, indifferent universe. Hey, Jax, Ree said, her usual optimism shining through. Think we'll ever find a place where we can settle down, maybe hang up our guns for good? Jax chuckled, the sound more genuine than he'd expected. If we do, it'll probably be because we've got nothing left to shoot. The crew laughed, their voices echoing through the cockpit, a defiant sound in the silence of space. They were alive, they were together, and for the moment that was enough. As their ship tore through the void, the crystal barrier shimmering around them like a promise, they knew the fight wasn't over. But maybe, just maybe, they'd get the last laugh. Because in the end, that was what being human was all about. Grit, humor, and a determination to flip the universe the bird, no matter what it threw at you. The cockpit of the ship vibrated with a weird mix of adrenaline and static tension, like a band getting ready for their first gig, except the audience was homicidal drones and the stage was a deadly crystal forest. You know, the usual Tuesday. Jax lounged at his usual spot, trying to look like a cool, collected captain. He had the demeanor down to an art, a blend of confidence and desperation that screamed, "Yes, I have a plan, and no, it's not just winging it with style." He looked at his crew, half of whom he'd probably fire if there was any other choice. But hey, beggars can't be choosers when the universe is their personal chew toy. "All right, gang," Jax said, clapping his hands with the enthusiasm of a man who'd just been volunteered to clean the lavatory. "Let's show these Zinth what happens when you poke the wrong bear." Or the right porcupine, Taylor muttered, eyes still glued to her malfunctioning scanner. It was currently producing sounds akin to a dying cat and flickering with the enthusiasm of a party light at a funeral. Ethan, ever the comforting presence of rational nihilism, chimed in, "Just to clarify, we're sure this plan won't end with us as a new species of toast, right?" "Relax, Ethan," Ree said, her fingers a blur over the console like she was conducting a symphony of doom. "I've got this. The crystal network's our best bet at turning the tables." Turning the tables, Yorin repeated with that sarcastic lilt he'd mastered. I didn't realize we were running a restaurant here. Yeah, and today's special is deep-fried alien overlords, Jax shot back. He was grinning, but there was an edge to it, something sharp and ready to cut. Ree's focus was unnerving, the sort of focus that suggested she wasn't just playing with high-voltage energy but was actively enjoying it. The Crystal Network was a beast, a temperamental monster of energy and potential, and she was going to make it purr like a kitten. Or at least, a kitten with a minor god complex. Energy levels holding, Ree reported, her voice steady, tinged with a touch of excitement. Her optimism was infuriatingly infectious. Looks like we're in business. The kind of business that involves less profit, more survival, Taylor quipped. She wiggled her scanner, casting it a wary look as if it might transform into a sentient toaster at any moment. Think the Zinth will appreciate our hospitality? Yorin asked, adjusting his glasses, which gleamed in the light of the crystal barrier outside. They'll appreciate it about as much as a slap in the face, Jax replied, his tone halfway between amusement and grim determination. The crystal forest outside shimmered, alive with a dangerous beauty that bordered on the ethereal, if you were into that sort of thing. The energy crackled, a luminous web that hummed with a promise of violence. All right, Ree, Jax said, his voice a directive. Let's give them a light show they won't forget. Ree nodded, and with a few deft movements, engaged the crystal network. Light erupted around their ship, an incandescent barrier that split the space like a knife. The forest seemed to pulse, the crystals flickering in a symphony of destructive harmony. Time to send these drones back to whatever glorified junkyard spat them out, Taylor muttered, her fingers dancing over her own controls, ready to support Ree's onslaught. As the drones approached, their silhouette menacing against the backdrop of the crystal forest, the barrier flared to life. Energy crackled, a web of light and power that lashed out at the intruders. The first wave of drones hit the barrier and exploded in a shower of sparks, their systems overloaded by the sheer force of the energy field. It was a sight to behold, like fireworks on a collision course with Armageddon. That'll teach them to underestimate the power of human ingenuity, Ethan said, a hint of awe in his voice as he watched the display. And human recklessness, Yorin added, not willing to let anyone forget the precariousness of their situation. Jax allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Zinth had underestimated them, and now they were reaping the reward of that mistake. But victory was fragile, a fleeting thing in a universe that thrived on chaos. Keep it steady, Ree, Jax instructed, his voice steady. We've still got a long way to go. Don't worry, Captain, Ree said, grinning like someone who'd just rewritten the laws of physics for fun. I've got this. The ship moved forward, the crystal barrier holding, a stalwart guardian against the onslaught of drones. Each impact was met with a burst of light, a testament to their defiance. As the last of the drones fell, the Zinth's grand plan to capture and control was shattered. The path to the ancient alien monolith, the source of their troubles and the key to Earth's survival, was clear. Looks like we're not dead yet, Taylor said, with a grin that could only be described as feral. Always a plus, Jax agreed, though his eyes were already on the next hurdle. The monolith loomed ahead, a structure of impossible angles and ancient design. It was the kind of thing that screamed trap in 50 different alien languages, but then again, they'd never been ones to back down from a challenge. All right, team, Jax said, his voice rallying. Let's get that data and show the universe that humanity's not done yet. The crew moved with purpose, their steps echoing through the ship like a heartbeat. It was a dance of chaos and coordination, each member a vital part of the whole, no matter how much they might whinge about it. As they approached the monolith, the air thrummed with potential, the weight of history pressing down on them. This was it, the moment they'd been fighting for. Think we'll find anything useful in there? Ethan asked, his voice tinged with a scholar's curiosity despite the circumstances. Only one way to find out, Jax replied, his hand hovering over the control that would open the monolith to them. The hatch opened with a groan, revealing the heart of the monolith, a chamber filled with consoles and screens, all crackling with the energy of ages. Get in there and do your thing," Jax instructed, waving her forward like a general ushering troops into battle. "With pleasure," Ree said, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the challenge. She dove into the task, her fingers moving across the alien console with a familiarity born of desperation and more than a little insanity. The screens flickered to life, symbols and codes dancing across them in a language long forgotten by time. "How's it looking?" Taylor asked, leaning over Ree's shoulder with the curiosity of a cat at a canary convention. "Like a puzzle with a missing piece," Ree replied, her focus never wavering. "But I think I can crack it." "Let's just hope it's not the kind of puzzle that ends with a bang," Yoren said, adjusting his glasses once more. The room was silent except for the hum of the monolith and the tapping of Ree's fingers. It was a moment suspended in time, each second a heartbeat in the symphony of their struggle. And then, suddenly, the room was filled with light. The consoles flashed, the screens clearing, revealing the data hidden within the monolith. It was a treasure trove of history, knowledge stretching back through the eons. "Got it," Ree said, triumph lacing her words. "We've got everything we need." Jax let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, a rare expression of relief crossing his face. "Then let's get out of here before the Zinth realize we've pulled the rug out from under them." As the crew gathered the data, their movements were quick, efficient. There was no time for celebration, not yet. But there was a sense of accomplishment, the knowledge that they'd done the impossible. "The universe might be a piece of work," Taylor said, her voice filled with a familiar, defiant humor. "But I'd like to think we just gave it a run for its money." "Here's to being the underdogs," Ethan said, a rare smile breaking through his usual caution. "And to making sure the Zinth never forget the name of this ragtag crew," Jax added, his grin wide and unrepentant. As they left the monolith, the ship soared into the stars, the crystal barrier shimmering behind them like a promise. They weren't out of the woods yet. The universe was still vast, still dangerous. But for the first time in a long time, they had hope. "We did it," Ree said, her optimism shining through her words. "Yeah," Jax replied, his voice carrying the weight of their victory. "We did." In the vast expanse of space, the ship sailed on, a beacon of defiance in a universe determined to grind them down. But for now, they'd won, and that was enough. "Think we'll ever find somewhere we can just rest?" Yoren asked, his voice quiet. Jax chuckled, the sound warm with camaraderie. "Rest? Maybe. But if not, we'll keep fighting. After all, we're only human." And as the stars stretched out before them, the crew laughed, their voices a bright, defiant echo in the silence of the cosmos. Because if the universe wanted a fight, it had picked the wrong crew to mess with. The monolith had given up its secrets, and now it was just a big, ominous hunk of alien architecture standing there in all its ancient arrogance. Fitting that something so self-important had been thoroughly looted by a bunch of scrappy humans. Jack stood at the helm of their ship, staring into the stars, the universe as indifferent as ever. "Look at it," Taylor said, nudging Jax. "Just sitting there like it's a monument to its own ego." "Monoliths usually are," Jax replied with a grin as sarcastic as it was weary. "Though I'll admit, it had some pretty interesting bedtime stories locked away in that rock." Ethan Cross, ever the historian, was practically bouncing on his toes despite the lingering danger. "We've just secured the most comprehensive archive of alien civilizations ever discovered. This is monumental. Yeah, assuming we don't lose it in our next mad dash through the galaxy," Yoren quipped, arms crossed. "And knowing our luck, that's about as likely as Ree going a whole Ior without saying her catchphrase." Ree shot him a look. "You know, Yoren, hope's the last thing Pandora let out of the box. Maybe that's why it's so damned stubborn." Jax turned his attention back to the crystalline nightmare that still surrounded them, a forest that had once tried its best to shred their ship like a hungry blender. "Let's just make sure we keep that hope alive, eh?" The crew shared a nod, a silent agreement that they'd somehow keep stumbling forward, despite every cosmic odd stacked against them. It wasn't much, but it was something. Now, we just need to package up this little treasure trove and make sure the Zinth don't decide to come back for a second round, Taylor said, eyes scanning the readouts as if expecting another wave of homicidal drones at any moment. Let them try, Ree said, her fingers dancing over the controls to secure the artifact's data. I've got a few more tricks up my sleeve. Right, because that's just what we need, more explosions, Yorin muttered, but there was a grudging respect in his voice. Jax turned to Ethan, who was still absorbed in reading through the ancient data. Anything in there about how to make these crystal trees less homicidal? Ethan looked up, adjusting his glasses. Nothing about that, but there's quite a bit on how they ended civilizations. The Zinth were thorough, not thorough enough, Jax said with a smirk. Otherwise, we'd be toast of the universe, Taylor added with a grin. Burnt to a crisp by our own stupidity, or brilliance, depending on how you look at it, Ethan countered, still lost in the glow of discovery. Let's hope the next batch of aliens has a better sense of humor, Jack sighed, easing the ship forward. Or at least a poor aim. As they cleared the edge of the crystal forest, the ship's engines hummed a comforting tune beneath their feet. It was a relief, a reminder that despite everything, they were moving forward, literally and metaphorically. Feels like we're shaking off a goddamn nightmare, Ree commented, glancing up at the pulsing stars. Like we're finally free of something we didn't even know was holding us down. Freedom's relative, Jax replied, eyes on the stars. Especially when the universe's favorite pastime is kicking us in the teeth. Yeah, but we're still here, Taylor said, her voice a defiant challenge to the cosmos. And we've got the goods. Got that right, Ethan agreed, his excitement finally tempered by the enormity of their discovery. This data could change everything. Give humanity a chance to learn from others' mistakes, or make all new ones, Yorin added, ever the voice of realism. Well, I'm voting for a bit of both, Jax said, adjusting their course towards the nearest human outpost. Because where's the fun in playing it safe? The crew's laughter echoed around them, a brief, bright sound in the vastness of space. It was a rare moment where hope felt tangible, even if it was wrapped in layers of sarcasm and gallows humor. Think we'll get a parade or something? Ree asked, half joking. You know, for saving humanity's bacon, sure, Taylor said, leaning back. Right after the part where they yell at us for nearly getting blown to atoms. Hey, at least we'll have the best damn story to tell at the bar, Yorin pointed out. Better than the usual my dog almost ate my homework excuse. I'd like to see anyone top we outwitted ancient aliens with attitude, Ethan said, finally tearing his gaze from the alien screens. Only in our nightmares, Jax said, shaking his head. Which, by the way, are due for a serious overhaul after this. Maybe something with less existential dread. As the ship coasted through the black, the crew fell into a comfortable silence, each member lost in their thoughts. The universe might be out to get them, but they'd outsmarted it this time, and that counted for something. It wasn't long before the human outpost came into view, a blip against the endless stars. Jax could feel the anticipation thrumming through the ship like a shared heartbeat. They were almost there. Home, Ree said almost reverently, or as close as we're gonna get for a while. Looks like a rust bucket from here, Yorin observed. But I'll take it. As they docked, the crew prepared to disembark, each of them aware that they were carrying a piece of history that could redefine humanity's place in the universe. No pressure. All right, folks, Jax said as they gathered at the airlock. Let's make sure this little adventure was worth all the near-death experiences. The doors opened with a hiss, revealing the bustling chaos of the outpost. It was a sight for sore eyes, humanity in all its messy, wonderful glory. Think they'll believe us? Taylor asked, surveying the scene. They'd better, Ree said, holding up a data chip. We've got the receipts. Ethan adjusted his glasses, a flicker of determination in his eyes. We'll make them see. This is too important to ignore. Then let's get to it, Jax said, stepping out into the throng. After all, history doesn't wait. As they moved through the crowd, the weight of their achievement settled over them. They'd done it. They'd survived the universe's latest attempt to crush them, and now they had the chance to ensure their story was told. "This is it," Yorin said, a rare smile breaking through his usual skepticism. "The start of something new. Here's hoping it's not also the start of the end," Jax replied, though his tone was lighter, buoyed by the prospect of having actually made a difference. With each step, the crew carried the knowledge of the monolith with them, a beacon for the future. They'd faced the unknown and emerged, if not unscathed, then at least with a few good stories to tell. "Think we'll get a statue?" Ree asked, ever the optimist. "Only if it's one that makes us look heroic and dashing," Taylor shot back, her grin wide. "Or at least slightly less scruffy than usual," Yorin added. Jax chuckled, feeling the camaraderie that had carried them through the darkest moments of their journey. They might not get statues, but they had each other. And really, that was the best kind of immortality. As they approached the research center, the doors opened to reveal a group of scientists and officials waiting for them, expressions ranging from disbelief to awe. "Welcome back," one of the officials said, stepping forward. "We've been eager to hear about your mission." Jax nodded, a grin tugging at his lips. "Hope you've got a minute. It's quite the tale." And with that, the crew launched into their story, each word a testament to their resilience, their ingenuity, and their refusal to back down in the face of overwhelming odds. As they spoke, the reality of what they'd accomplished settled in, a chance to reshape the narrative, to give humanity a future worth fighting for. In the end, it didn't matter whether they got statues or parades. What mattered was that they'd done something incredible, something that would echo through history. They were more than just survivors. They were pioneers, explorers of the unknown, defiant in the face of a universe that seemed determined to break them. And as they stood there, sharing their story, they knew that whatever came next, they'd face it together, with sarcasm, wit, and an unshakable determination. Because if the universe wanted a fight, it had picked the wrong crew to mess with.